television station serving the capital area.
I'm Elinor Thornton. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Speaking of Concord. My guest is Christa McAuliffe, Concord High School social studies teacher, and now a very viable space candidate, one of the 10 finalists chosen by NASA that has a chance to ride aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger in January. First, thank you for joining me, Christa, and I'd like to congratulate you on behalf, I think, of the city of Concord. We're all very proud and excited for you.
Oh, thank you, Elinor. I'm happy to be here.
Obviously, this effort did not begin just yesterday. It's been a process that you've been working at for some time. I'm curious to know how you went about making yourself a candidate for the
space shuttle.
For the space shuttle, right?
When Reagan announced, my husband and I were really excited about it. We've always been interested in flight. So it was something when the president said the first private citizen is going to be a teacher, I remember Steve saying, well, you've got to apply. This would be wonderful. I'm the delegate for the New Hampshire Council of Social Studies for the national conventions. And when I went down to Washington in November, I happened to be passing an information booth, and there in the middle of the booth was an application for teachers in space. So a couple of my colleagues and I took it and sent in for the full application, and that's when the process began. When I first got the application, I was a little taken aback. It was 8 essays, 15 pages. We had to get quite a few signatures and releases from our superintendent to ensure that we would be able to go if we were chosen. We also had to get a community person involved with a recommendation, somebody from our peer group involved. We had to get somebody from the administration involved. And finally, after working on this for a few months, kind of piecing it together, and finding out why I wanted to be the first private citizen in space and how I fostered international and national awareness in my students, getting my essays condensed to a small block on each of those pages. I mailed it for the deadline on the 31st of January, felt very proud of myself that I mailed it and felt very relieved that it was done.
That's quite a process. According to your husband, who was the first person I had a chance to speak with before you, he talked of your love of space, as you now say, since you were a youngster. How did that foster itself?
Well, my parents were very concerned about keeping us up with all of the things that were happening in the world. They wanted us to watch television and watch the news, and we would talk about these things at the dinner table. And one of the things that was intriguing to them, just like I'm sure people were intrigued with the Wright brothers' first flight and then the advancements after that, was when the first satellites were launched. I remember watching that. I remember the aborted attempts. I remember seeing some of the Vanguard rockets start to go off and land on the pad instead of go up into space. And when Alan Shepard made that first suborbital flight, my parents were so excited, and I can remember sitting there and watching it and then watching it again at school, and it was so exciting. I mean, this was a real, it was such an impact on history that space flight was actually going to continue. And we would be herded into the cafeteria when these things were on, or herded into the gymnasiums. And I got caught up in that excitement. As a historian, you're always looking for advances, and this big technological advance, you could go into the classroom and say, think what the future's going to be like. We're going to be able to live in a space station. We're going to be out on maybe another planet. I mean, we even at that point thought that maybe Mars was able to be inhabited. So it was an exciting time to live.
The field of teachers started out with, I guess, over 10,000 candidates, as I understand.
Yes.
That was whittled down to 110.
Well, actually it was 114.
Okay, 2 from every state including
plus the territories and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the people who teach overseas, like the Department of Defense schools, also were able to apply.
And and then the final 10.
Yes.
Now, I understand some of the earlier comments that you made about the camaraderie that exists between teachers, but there had to be some things that you found special about yourself, as the judges did, that brought you to that point. Can you talk about some of those?
What I think they're looking for is someone who communicates well and someone who everybody, both students and teachers and the general public, can identify with. I hope I'm that type of person. I think that that's one of the things they were looking for, a good communicator who will be able to bring all of those wonders back from the shuttle flight and be able to bring it to a level that people will be very excited about and will understand.
You've been quoted as saying that you feel like a real pioneer heading west in a Conestoga wagon. Yet as a woman, you obviously have some good company in the space program. I'm wondering what it feels like to know that you are having a chance to become part of the world of the astronauts for a time.
When I was teaching American history, I was always concerned that the military, political, and economic history was in the textbooks, but we never found out what happened to the ordinary person, because social history is not there. I teach a women's course at Concord High School, and one of my students raised their hand the first time and said, Ms. McAuliffe, I always wanted to know what women were doing during that time, but I never found out from the history books. And this little piece of what the ordinary person was doing, what a teenager was doing back in the 1920s, what women were doing during the Revolutionary War, I feel is a real important part of history. So not only as a woman, but as a person, an ordinary person, who feels that I live history every day, I really feel important that a teacher is able to look at things so much differently, be able to kind of demystify the space age and take all the acronyms that the astronauts use and that the government uses and put them into simple words so that they can really describe what happens. Not look at it from a technological point of view, but as a person who is taking this pioneering trip for the first time.
Right. That was the main goal that you said that you would like to bring back from from space, humanizing the technology of the space age, and that talking about some of the key things that you felt brought you to the final 10. What were some of the other qualifications?
In the essays, they wanted someone who was involved in their community, which I am, and they wanted somebody who probably would write well, which I feel I do. They also were asking things like, how do you continually enrich your life as far as not only community events, but also your own professional life. They wanted to know what other courses I had taken, other things that I am continually not only teaching students, but I'm learning myself. And I think that looking back over my, my application packet, those things were very self-evident.
More with Christa McAuliffe when we return. Christa, you have said that you felt the President's decision to select the first American citizen in space should appropriately come from the field of teaching. Why?
In the years that I've taught, approximately 1,500 to 2,000 students have walked through my classroom. I can't think of any better person or group of people to bring back information to get young people excited about something. We touch on the changes of life all the time, and we're part of that. And I really feel that not only was it a nice recognition that teaching is important, I think it's going to help the role of a teacher and certainly add some prestige to the profession, but also recognizing the fact that we do see so many people, and that's an important thing.
What was the response from the students? They must have known when you didn't, I guess, show up for class?
I kept them informed the whole time. When I applied, I told them that I was going to apply. I said I felt really good. I went to the post office and I mailed this teacher in space packet, and some of them kind of rolled their eyes back and others said, that sounds right. I figured you'd do something like that. So they were really kept abreast of the whole thing. I told them when I was going in for my first interview and that it was narrowed down to 7 in the state, and they were all wishing me good luck and hanging out the windows and waving and saying, you know, go get them, you know, we're rooting for you. That's been wonderful. One of the things I have to do within the next couple of days is mail.
Go back? Have you had a chance to go back or just to visit with them?
Well, some of my students I probably won't see because they're seniors, and they left their addresses with me, so I'm going to be mailing some postcards to let them know that at least I got this far. I have kids tooting horns coming by the house, and I met a few of them doing some errands, and that's been fun.
Have you thought at all about what this means politically for teachers?
Well, the whole process right now has been very non-political. I was amazed when I got the application and they didn't ask, for example, any physical requirements, or they didn't ask your race, and they didn't ask religion, they didn't ask party affiliation. There was very little information, personal information, that was put down. When we got to the selection of the 10, I also thought, well, they'll probably want to get people from different regions of the country to make it a little bit more fair, you know, that we have a good teacher, you know, in the South and a good teacher here. But the selection process was not looking at that. They were looking at individuals and how they communicated. And as a result, we have 3 New England states represented, which I think is marvelous.
That is overwhelming. What has been the feeling among the 10 finalists? I mean, when you had a chance to get together and speak with them, what has the feeling been there?
We have been delighted. When I snuck into the L'Enfant Plaza Hotel when I wasn't supposed to be telling anybody, and
were you able to keep a secret? I have to know that.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was. I was able to do that, but that was real hard. And I came in with my bags, and they had told us prior to going down, now please don't congregate as a group because we really want to keep this for the press conference on Monday. And there were 3 people who I recognized who were standing over there, and I kind of walked in with my eyes straight, and they're all going, hey, hey, over here, over here. I said, boy, that's really subtle, you know. But we were so excited. It was really hard to keep that down.
So you were told on a Thursday, was it?
I came back to New Hampshire. I had stayed down in Washington and visited with a friend of mine who I used to teach with. And in staying over Thursday night to visit with my friend, apparently it was real hard for NASA to get in touch with me. And they had tried several times at Pat's apartment, but we were in and out and visiting people. And by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was in the airport waiting for my plane, which I missed because the traffic was really heavy in Washington.
And all this time they're trying
to get hold of me, and the phone is just ringing and no one's answering it. So I went to the airport, got another plane, got everything straightened around. 2 planes were late. I got to Manchester at 12 o'clock that night, and at 12:30 I was home. And really not thinking too much of it because they had said, we'll probably notify you sometime between now and Saturday. 3:30 in the morning, the phone rang. And my husband answered the phone, and I figured it was just a crank call. And he answered the phone, and he came upstairs, and he said, it's NASA. I think you made the 10. And as I was fumbling my way downstairs,
Did he really say it that calmly?
Yes, he did, probably because it was 3:30 in the morning. But as I was coming downstairs, I was thinking, if this is a joke, I am never going to forgive him. And by 3 o'clock that afternoon on Saturday, I was back down in Washington. And I was told at that point, don't tell anyone. I had errands to run. I had a few hours in Concord on Saturday, so I went downtown. I bumped into people. And I was trying to bite my tongue and say, I wanted to jump up and down and say, I made it, I made it. And I had to say, we'll know by Monday. I'll get in touch with you. And just leave it at that.
Pretty good acting job.
That was hard.
What is the feeling now among the 10 finalists? Is it getting competitive? Is the nail biting going on, or what kind of atmosphere exists now?
Since we're not really taking a test, and there's no point system, there's not certain things that we're going through and saying, well, if I get through this, I'll advance one step further. If I get through this, I'll get some points on that. It's not really like that. Because they're dealing with communication, it's much more vague, but it's a lot better for us because we don't see ourselves as 1 foot ahead of somebody else. We're a real tight-knit group even after that, those 3 days, and knowing that only one of us is going. And I think we're just going to feel delighted when the selection is made, whoever goes.
We'll have more in just a minute. What is next on the agenda?
Sunday I leave to go down to Houston. I have a 7:25 flight out of Manchester Sunday morning. And in Houston, what we will do is we'll go through some psychological testing, some physical testing. We'll go into the altitude chamber, and that's where they deprive you of oxygen in small amounts just to see if that's going to have any effect on on your body. That is not part of the actual grade, if you would, for making the actual person who's going to go on board the shuttle, though. The altitude chamber and the KC-135, which is the plane that takes you up and does the big parabolas so that you can see what weightlessness is all about. Those two things are just so that we can experience them. But if you pass out in the altitude chamber and you throw up on the KC-135, they're not going to eliminate you and scratch your name off. But those two things are just another experience that we're going to have down there. They're going to put us on a treadmill type of test so that we can find out, cardiovascular fitness, see if there would be any problem with blood pressure. I'm sure there are going to be other medical tests, which I really don't know at this point. And then, after about a week there, and hopefully during that week, we're also going to watch from Mission Control one of the launches that's scheduled for that, so that will be fun. And then they're going to take us to Marshall Space Center in Huntsville, Alabama, where we'll look at something called Space Camp, where they have kids and adults from around the country can go through all sorts of simulations. And they have this running during the summer months. Then we go to Washington, and I'll be a week in Washington, and that's when it'll get probably a little tense. So from the 15th to the 19th of July, there'll be a panel of 7 NASA officials who will be interviewing each one of us for approximately 45 minutes, and they will then make that ultimate decision as to who's the flyer and who's the alternate.
What kind of physical condition are you in right now?
Well, I run, and I've always...
Daily?
Well, yes, for probably about 6 years. I've been running, and I play tennis, and I play volleyball. I've always been very involved in organized sports, but I started running when my daughter was born about 6 years ago, and I've really enjoyed it.
And you are a mother of 2.
Yes, yes.
So you've always maintained the physical fitness aspect of your as a daily regimen.
Well, I found also that in teaching, it was kind of a nice break, because what I would usually do is I would teach during the day, around 3 o'clock or so, I would go out and run, and then I would come home, and that kind of gave me that break between the school environment and the home environment, and I wasn't kind of bringing my problems from school to home.
What about when you went before the panelists, and they were apparently all big name people, either actors or people that are currently in space or space related, NASA officials as well, or what were some of the questions that you were asked before that panelist in the decision for the final 10?
Some of the judges deviated a little bit from the questions. I think they were just trying to find out in 15 minutes basically what your application already told them and what your videotape already told them, and if this confirmed it by meeting you in person. They would ask you things like, well, tell me about your teaching. Why do you like to teach? One of the things they asked kind of to catch you off guard was, well, explain one of your most embarrassing moments.
Can you talk publicly about that?
Oh, that's not a problem. When I was new at Concord High School, and there was a back-to-school night in October, so I was very new to the building. I'd only been there for approximately 5 weeks. I had a whole group of parents there and very interested in what I was teaching, so I was telling them about my subject area, what we did in the classroom, a little bit about my grading system, and people were really involved in a packed room, and I had about a minute and a half left. So at that time I said to them, gee, do you have any questions? And one man raised his hand and he said, yes, can you tell me where the music room is? And I said, I have no idea. After that, I don't ask for any questions on back-to-school nights.
In reading some of the other questions that panelists asked potential finalists, one of them was, how do you explain or describe passion? I thought that was a really interesting question. I even talked to my father about it, because to show that there was a clear separation there between just the love of something. Can I just ask you how you would have answered that if that question was asked to you?
Well, I believe the question was asked by Robert Jarvik.
Right.
And I know several people who came out feeling that was really hard, that they were answering regular questions along, and all of a sudden he threw in the zinger, which he could, and any of the judges could do that. But it also gets you to think about it. I mean, if you really love something, like teaching or whatever, or you're really passionate about it, it's something like you just would never deviate from anything else. I mean, I am in a field right now. I've had a choice. I could have left and done something else. You know, teaching wasn't something that I fell into and I just had to stay in. And I chose that. And I think they're looking for somebody who does feel passionate about teaching, who really loves the profession, and it's something they're going to stay in, and they're going to be continuing with this throughout the rest of their life. That's the person that they need as a teacher in space.
So are you telling us now that Concord High School can expect to have you back if you are the chosen one or the alternate, that you will be coming back to the world of teaching?
I couldn't give up all of those teenagers. I miss them in the summer.
They say that, I guess it would be after the trip ended in space, that it would be a year spent traveling and speaking and talking of the episode.
What they're hoping is the space shuttle flight is scheduled for January 22nd. So for the remainder of the school year, probably till June or July, you would be traveling around the country, going to probably a lot of national conventions and telling people what happened in space, how they can use this in the classroom, how to get the students excited. But they're hoping that you would return the next September to your classroom. So it's almost like a school year rather than a whole year of 12 months. It would be from maybe September until June or July.
You have said in I guess probably even objectively looking at yourself compared to the 10 finalists, that there isn't one area where you feel inadequate or lesser than or any less of a chance than the other 9 for being chosen as a finalist.
All 10 of us, it's almost like we're on the starting block and we're ready to go. I feel that we're all about the same. We're very enthusiastic, we're articulate, we love the students, we love teaching, we like our profession, we're very excited about space. I don't see any one of us really having an edge over somebody else, and that's a comfortable feeling. I really like that now that we're a real close-knit group, and I think we're really going to enjoy it when we go down to Houston, just learning more about each other and sharing.
Well, I guess obviously all the eyes of the nation will be on you 10, but you've got the backing of Concord, and we really wish you well from here on in.
Oh, thank
I'd like
you.
to thank you for joining us on this edition of Speaking of Concord, Christa, and thank you for watching. I'm Elinor Thornton.